And it's like, when you become a father for the first time, one of the questions I always ask fathers is, where do you get your ideas from about?
I'm spending time with one of the world's leading experts on fatherhood and love. Anna Machin is an evolutionary anthropologist whose research has helped to transform how we understand human connection. Machin is the author of 2 books, The Life of Dad and her latest, Why We Love, explaining the new science behind our closest relationships, from why we love to how we love, and perhaps most controversially, why she thinks the experts have been wrong on fatherhood. On this episode of The InnerView, love expert Anna Machin paid us a visit from Oxford to set the record straight on fatherhood in the modern world. Dr. Anna Machin.
Hello.
Nice to speak to you.
Thank you.
Tell me why you felt it was so important to sort of set the record straight on fatherhood.
Because nearly everything we think about fathers is wrong. It's a myth. It's a cultural myth that we've built up over time. And those myths are things like fathers are dispensable, that we don't need them, that the bond between a mother and child is much more powerful than that between a father and child, and that fathers have no role to play in child development at all, because mums are the primary carer, they have the biggest input. And we know from 20 years of research now that all of those are wrong. And the reason why we need to set the record straight is because those myths are what perpetuate the way we treat fathers in our society. And that's not only difficult for fathers, but actually it has a detrimental effect on their children, because it means that they are not encouraged or empowered to be involved with their children, and they have a critical role to play.
Why was there no data? I mean, I feel that there has been data on fathers when it's used instrumentally or politically. So for example, in the US, in the culture wars, right-wingers will say, well, black people are more prone to crime because there's no father. So I've seen data, but it's always used in culture wars or as political weapons. But more generally, why do you think there was this gap broadly when it comes to studying fathers and fatherhood?
I mean, you're right. When I started, there was lots of data on absent fathers and the impact they had. But there was no data on the vast majority of fathers who stick around, whether they co-reside or not. They stick around and input into their children. And it is simply because we had this mantra, this belief that they weren't important. So if they're not important, why would we waste research money on them? Why would we ask them who they are or what happened to them when they became fathers? So obviously we've got a huge amount of data on mothers, but it was simply because, they're not important, so why would we bother asking the question?
Was that derived from culture?
Yes, completely. Completely. And it's a huge absence, and it says something, I'm afraid, negative about my own profession. I'm an anthropologist, and we had failed to study a major member of our society, and that's on us. We shouldn't have done that, and we shouldn't have assumed that the cultural story was correct.
Where did that place you when, I would imagine, especially as a professional woman at the top of your field, deciding to study fathers, when in the zeitgeist we hear that there's the patriarchy and men have dominated everything. Why are you giving them airtime now when we should be studying women? Do you feel as if you got sort of sucked into the narratives that were ubiquitous about gender roles and so on?
Yeah, I think I did, and I do get criticism, I'm afraid, particularly from fellow women, that I'm spending my time as a woman focusing on men. But that's looking at it in a very binary and very black and white way. Actually, if we can empower men to be involved with their children, if we can say to them that they are important, that they are unique, that they are needed, then we get greater equality in the home. And you will only ever get true equality in the workplace for women if you get equality for men in the home. And these two come hand in hand. So that's my response to people who say, why partly are you studying fathers? Part of the reason is it's about actually equality within our society. It's saying to men, here, you have a right to be in the home, you have a right to be with your children. I'm going to help and support and fight for that, which is part of my work. But that also frees up women. That frees up women to go back to work. So, and also, as I said, as an anthropologist, it's incredibly important. I'm married to a father, and in fact, my work began because of the way he was treated when we had our first child. And that is the reason why I do the work I do, partly, is because he was excluded, he was not supported, he was not recognised or empowered. And that I found difficult because he was building the most wonderful bond with our child. I could see it in front of my eyes. I could see how much she needed him. And that went directly against the way he had been treated. He was sort of, stand in the corner, out the way, we're just going to talk to mum and baby here. And so that's partly why I do it. It's partly for a personal reason, but also because he's a major member of our society. And as I say, only by equality in the home do you get equality in the workplace.
When our daughters were born, I guess I internalized, the sort of common knowledge of like, yeah, sure, your entertainment, your philosophy, your presence, you're giving, you're providing all of these things, but it's not as important as the mom, especially in those first couple of years. Is that wrong?
Yes.
Why?
It's wrong partly because fathers have a unique role to play in the development of their children, and it's more powerful than mums within this particular area. And that is, they scaffold the child's entry into the world beyond the family. They are the parent who is going to help that child develop the social skills, the social language, the mental and physical resilience, the good mental health to be able to go out into the world and survive and thrive. And that starts the moment that baby's born, because human babies are born too early. And our brains are not fully developed. And the particular area of the brain that's really not developed is the prefrontal cortex, which is behind your forehead. And that's where all that social cognition is. Some people argue that's the bit that makes us human. And so from the moment you meet your baby as a father, your input is really critical, because it's actually you that really has to underpin the development of the prefrontal cortex, because you are going to be the parent of the bigger, wider world. And so even though fathers say to me, even fathers who actually work in the fatherhood sector say to me, yes, but I don't feel I'm very important until, sort of maybe 6 months when I can play with the baby. Yeah. Absolutely not true. Babies are massive sponges, and the environment you create is going to feed into their development from the moment they arrive. So you mustn't think, even though it's hard in those first weeks, particularly if your partner's breastfeeding, to get a look in as a father, you must try, because it's so important that you have that input from the year dot.
So there is that data about absent fathers and deadbeat dads and all of that. And I guess let me try then to ask, what does the data suggest happens if a father is just not as present as they should be or can be in those initial years? How does the development of the child vary?
So if we have a father who's not so involved, particularly in the first 2 years of life, what we see, for example, is we see a retardation in the development of social language. We see a retardation in what we call the development of certain social skills. So pro-social behaviours, things like sharing, caring, helping, how to get along with people.
And I'm not talking about like a dad who doesn't show up.
No.
This is a good guy who's just probably not as involved because he believes that this is mommy's time and my time comes later.
Yeah. So we do see, we still see these retardation in social language. Dad seems to be the person who underpins social language. As I say, pro-social skills, a thing called executive function. Now, executive function is a higher level of cognitive ability, and it's things like attention and problem solving and emotional regulation and all these sorts of things that you do need to be a successful human. And again, we see a slight retardation in that if dad's not as hands-on as maybe he could be. But these dads are around, absolutely. They're providing, they're there in the evenings, they're there at the weekends. But if they don't really get involved with really interacting with that child, that's the most important thing, is interacting with that child. We know that fathers tend to do what we call a stimulatory interaction. So whereas mothers' interaction tends to be more nurturing, fathers, it tends to be more stimulatory, which is, you said at the beginning, fun dad, but that's actually your role, is to be active, is to sort of push physical resilience, push mental resilience. And if you can do that as a father, then you're going to have lots and lots of positive outcomes for that child.
I don't want this interview to be daddy propaganda, but do you feel there has been anti-daddy propaganda?
Completely. Yeah. And, I'm all for daddy propaganda, to be absolutely honest, because I think we need to rebalance things a little bit. I am absolutely up there putting mums on a pedestal. I'm a mum. I'm very happy to be on the pedestal. But I think we need to just push mum over a little bit, but dad up there too, because actually it's both of them who really create this full developmental environment. And so we do have to rebalance the scales a little bit, and because if we support fathers and if we say to them, you really are critical, I'm hoping, at least for the vast majority of them, that gives them a push to be more involved. And that's why it's important to spread the message, because actually the ultimate outcome is your child. And you want your child to have the best start in life they can have.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, I think when people say, well, fathers are important and they should be more involved, especially in the early developmental years, it's often couched in a way that says you need to do the things mom does. So you need to be more involved feeding that kid and changing nappies. But I guess what you're saying is, no, you have other things to bring to the party that you undervalued and underestimated?
Yeah, I have this saying that fathers are not male mothers.
Right.
Okay, the fathering role is very different. Yes, you should be doing caretaking because actually that's an important part of your bonding process. So absolutely do the caretaking. But you are there to do things differently. I'm an evolutionary anthropologist, and evolution hates redundancy. So it's not going to cause something as very, very rare as a human father to evolve to give them exactly the same job as mum's got. They do a subtly different thing, and they, for example, the attachment they build to their child is subtly different, how they interact with their child is subtly different, and that is all really, really important. So what I always say to fathers is do it your way. Actually, it's really important to your child that you do it your way, and you don't just, follow the minute-by-minute schedule that mum's left you. It's very important that you show your child this difference and you give that different developmental input.
Moving on from biological father to father figure, and sometimes the two are one and the same.
Yeah.
Especially as children get older, are we seeing some sort of crisis in modernity where people are looking for father figures beyond their own fathers?
Yes, I think I need to be clear. When I talk about father as an anthropologist, bearing in mind I've studied it around the world, in the West, we have a bit of an obsession with the biological father, and he is the father. And quite often people will say to me, well, my biological father was not there, or he wasn't very good. Actually, if we look around the world, the term father is given to any man who steps up and does the job, and quite often it's a social father, or what we would call a father figure. So it could be a grandfather, an uncle, an older sibling, it could be mum's best friend, it could be a football coach, it could be a teacher. And so what I always say to people, because quite often people will say, well, yes, I didn't have a father, is they probably had father figures. And actually what's fascinating is those father figures have as powerful a role to play as the biological father, because it's about doing the job. It's not about being genetically related to that child that gives you that role. It's actually, do you do the job? And that's, yes, we are seeing an absence of father figures. I think particularly for young boys, we're having a bit of a crisis of masculinity in some places, and that's partly because of a search to find an appropriate father figure. But a father figure is really any man who steps into a child's life, and it can actually be a team of men, it doesn't have to be one man, who fulfill those roles that child is going to need.
You're also an expert on love.
Yes.
There are two main books, two sort of pillars in your career thus far, and looking forward to much more. So, you study fatherhood and you study love. And let me find a nice philosophical way to segue to love. I don't talk much about my personal life during these interviews, but I love my daughters, like more than anything and everything. They are redemptive. They're the only great thing that I'm most proud of in my life. And this is the same for a lot of men that I know, friends, family. I mean, we're broken and messed up and whatever, but, we try hard as dads. I sometimes wonder if we truly knew just how much other people love their children in the same way that we love our children, even our enemies, would we even go to war? Like, do we underestimate just how much love we have for our children? That same love that I have, that you have, those other guys on the other side, they have it too.
Absolutely, they absolutely do. I mean, one of the frustrating but also amazing things about my job looking at love is that we now objectively understand lots of measures of love, but we will never, I really don't think we'll ever be able to touch on how powerful love feels. And how powerful it is to you and how powerful it is to me. And if I could have one power, it would be to experience somebody else's experience of love, just to see if it's like mine. But no, I mean, arguably the love between a parent and a child is probably the closest to unconditional love you can get, and it's the most powerful love there is, I think. And yes, you're absolutely right. If we stopped to think, even on the battlefield, this is someone's child, and there's a parent somewhere who powerfully loves this child, and we got back in touch with the humanity of love, I think it would do us a lot of good. And that's what I always say, love sits at the centre of what it is to be human, actually. And I think, particularly in the modern world, we've lost contact with that a little bit, I think.
Were you trying to solve that riddle or answer the question nested inside that problem as well when you decided to study love? The same as when you felt there was a gap when it came to fatherhood?
Initially, no. When I first took up my job, I thought, oh, I'm going to be another person studying romantic love. Here we go. And actually, I quickly realised that, like a lot of people, I, at the start, had a very restricted view of love. So I thought, we're going to talk about romantic love. And obviously, what you quite quickly realise, first of all, is humans can experience love in so many different ways. And so part of my role is to try and get people to re-engage with all the different sorts of love. We have a multi-billion-dollar dating industry, love industry, and that kind of gives you an impression that romantic love is the most important love there is. It isn't. There isn't actually a hierarchy. And actually, what you need as a human is to have love in your life. And that could be love for your family, for your friends, for your children. It could be love of God. It can be love of your pet. You know, any sort of love is good. Love of your community, for example. So that was the first thing I wanted to do. Secondly, as humans, we like to reduce things down to an answer because we like a nice, simple answer. And when it came to love, you very quickly realise there isn't one. And that's part of the reason why we have endless poetry and literature written about love. It's a search for an answer. So I decided as an anthropologist, if you study a behaviour, you have to try and understand it from every different possible viewpoint. And so I actually wanted to give the maximalist idea of what love is. So what is love in our brain? What is love in our body? What is love in our psychology? What is love in our behaviour? What is love in our genes? But also, what is love in our culture? How does culture affect what you think love is and how you experience love and what you think appropriate love is?
Is it culturally contingent? Does it differ
Yes.
depending on where?
Oh, very strongly, very strongly. So whilst the science is pretty much fixed, there's a universality to the science, you go to different areas of the world and you say, what is love? And you will get many, many different answers. Even in a room of people who all come from the same culture, if you ask them that question, what is love? You'll get 300 different answers because it's a very personal thing and it's a very cultural thing. So the rules that you were told about love when you were growing up, which were either religious or legal or from your family, the media you watch, the representations you've seen on the screen or the books you've read dictate what you think love is. And so all these things come together to give you your response to the question, what is love? And then into that, you have all the science as well. So it's actually a very complex web. Someone's individual experience of love is close to probably being unique because there's so many different factors that will feed into it. And that's really what I suppose I see in terms of my love work, is I want people to engage with that complexity, not run away from it. Because in the past we've run away from it and gone, it scares me, I can't control it, and I don't know what the answer is. Whereas actually that complexity is why it's so amazing and why I don't get tired of studying it, because it's actually it's awe-inspiring to see how complicated it is.
And in this modern age, is there a crisis of love?
Yes, I think so.
What's the problem?
We've been told, I think, mainly two things. We're very busy, and we have technology which efficiently handles our busyness. And the problem with that is relationships are not supposed to be efficient, and they are not supposed to just be run like everything else in your life. And I think the digital world has made us think that we can maintain those relationships by, sending a group WhatsApp or posting something on Instagram or,
sending a heart on WhatsApp.
And saying that, there we go, I've responded, I've acknowledged you exist, thank you. And that's, I'm afraid, just not good enough.
Or my auntie who thought that LOL meant lots of love.
Yes.
She responded to a death notice with lol.
Oh dear, that's not good. And, we think they're efficient and we can do it that way. And we know from looking at the data that leads to a faster decay of a relationship. Because relationships are supposed to be time intense, cognitively intense, because they're so valuable to you.
Make you vulnerable.
Yeah. They are, we call them social capital because they're a bit like financial capital. They are very, very valuable. And what do you do with financial capital? You invest in it. And you have to invest in your relationships. And I'm afraid your brain has not evolved to do that in your phone or on your laptop. You have to be present with people, give them your time, and that's how you nurture relationships. And the reason why we say it's important is your relationships are the number one factor in your mental and physical health, your longevity, your well-being in your life. Stronger than quitting smoking, losing weight, eating your vegetables, going for a run. All of these things are important. I absolutely acknowledge that. But above them all is your social network. And so we've kind of been misled into thinking they can be run efficiently like everything else. And they shouldn't be. And that's where we've fallen down, I think.
Yeah, I always joke with teenagers now, and especially young boys like 15, 16 years old. I said, in my day we had to pick up the landline and call the girl's house and speak to the dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You needed to have courage, and you guys just, I don't know, DM on the apps or whatever it is, right? So I mean, does that expand to other things? This idea that you can sort of protect yourself, you create your own avatar, you curate your own personality, a heightened version of yourself, and also there's no vulnerability.
No.
There's no cost to putting yourself out there. Is that something that we're seeing more and more of in the modern age, where people are trying to do this, not only with romantic love?
I think so. I think they do it with all forms of love. I think they do it with all forms of love. You do it with your family, you do it with your friends, and I think it's made people, again, feel like their relationships are less valuable to them. And that's a real pity, because they are the most valuable thing you've got. And I think we realised that during COVID. When we were all isolated, I don't know what you missed, but I had a yearning for my family, for my parents, and I couldn't be with them. And that yearning is your body saying to you, you've taken away from me something that's absolutely vital to me functioning. And I think we need to remember that feeling, because that is your body telling you you're missing something. It's as vital to you as food and water. It's an absolute physiological need, love. And if you don't have it, you will definitely suffer.
I can use Grok or ChatGPT or whatever, Meta AI to write poetry or something, right? But there does seem to be something uncanny and parasocial about interacting with AI. Now, what do you make of the fact that people are trying to use the tools to express love and affection, and even if it's solidarity, with people on the other end of the earth when it comes to social issues or political issues, etc. Does it depend? Is it altogether good, altogether bad, somewhere in between? I
think it's somewhere in between. I think any technological advance, you've got to be very careful about taking an extreme view on it. And I think we've learned from the past that we need to sit in the middle. There are advantages to things like AI, ChatGPT, all those sorts of things. Certainly, if you're socially anxious, if you find it difficult to put together your words to communicate with people, it can be hugely important and helpful. I think the problem is that our brains are really good at spotting something that's not been developed by a human. And that can lead us to feeling unsettled, and it can lead us to wanting to make less of a commitment to that person. So all those people who are writing their responses on dating apps with ChatGPT, just be aware that the person at the other end's brain is good at spotting it. And that means that you develop less of a bond with that person, because when we interact, you and I are interacting now, there's lots of activity in our prefrontal cortex. We've probably got some oxytocin surging around, which is a bonding hormone. We know, our brains know we're talking to another sentient being. When you communicate...
Well, do you really know?
Well, I'm hoping you're a sentient being.
Look at my mouth, it's so weird,
But when we interact with AI, our brains know that, and you get really very little activity in the prefrontal cortex. You certainly don't get any lovely beneficial neurochemistry. So even though you think you're getting away with it, the brain at the other end of this communication is very likely aware that this is not actually a human speaking. And that's detrimental to the bond you're trying to develop with that person. So I always say, use it for tips, but I would be very nervous at this stage of using it to communicate in place of actually your own brain communicating.
We're trying to adjust to this modern world that we've created. As an evolutionary anthropologist, given everything that's in our genes, that's built in, encoded for millions of years, are we maladapted? Are we a profound mismatch, particularly to this modern world?
Yes, because your brain, human evolution goes incredibly slowly. So the brain we have today is at least tens of thousands of years old, and it's certainly never envisaged that it would be communicating through a screen. So the problem we have, I kind of a bit like the hare and the tortoise. So technology is the hare, it's shooting off into the distance. We are amazing at developing technology, it's exponential in terms of what we develop. But the brain is a tortoise, it's plodding along very, very slowly. And therefore you have this massive mismatch between biological evolution, which is the brain, and cultural evolution, which is the innovation. And there is this mismatch. Our brain can't deal with it, and that is why we are seeing these negative outcomes of technology. What worries me is we never seem to learn. So we see something new and shiny, And unfortunately, humans love new shiny stuff. That's in our genes. And so we run towards it and think, this is great, this is going to make my life so much better. And we throw ourselves full headlong. We don't stop and think, what could possibly be the drawbacks of this? And that's what we did with social media. We all threw ourselves into it. We tried to operate entirely online, and we saw the outcomes in terms of, poor mental health, issues with body image, that kind of thing. We saw the decay of relationships. And now we are actually coming backwards. So all these new campaigns that children shouldn't have screens, for example, and that actually we need to, date in the real world and that kind of thing. We're coming backwards. I hope we do that with AI before we jump in with both feet. I really do. I hope we stop and think, how can we use this tool to help us? Because it's a tool. Tools are supposed to be beneficial. But also, what are the drawbacks that I need to avoid? Where are the lines? I talk a lot about humanoid robots and those being used within what I call our intimate relationships. So those between, your partner or those with your children, or those with your elder relatives. Would you want, for example, your grandmother to be cared for by an AI robot instead of a human? Would you like your child to be raised by an AI nanny? These are all questions. They sound extreme, but they are literally here. And so we need to decide as a species, what are the good bits and what are the bits we really, really need to avoid? Because otherwise we're going to end up where we were with social media, and still are to a certain extent, and it's going to be even harder basically to put the horse back in the stable and say, right, no, we don't want that bit. And so we've got to be really careful.
Well, Dr. Anna Machin, thanks so much.
Thank you.